He always said we were a team, right? That my belief in him was like his rocket fuel. If only he'd known the truth behind that belief. It wasn't love. It was a calculated investment. See, I was betting on his future, a future I desperately wanted a piece of, even if I didn't truly want him. And then, the stock market of my carefully built life didn't just crash. It absolutely exploded. Ever made a really big decision that just felt like a total gamble? Like you were pushing all your chips onto one number, holding your breath, just waiting for that wheel to stop spinning? That was me, for 5 whole years. My bet wasn't on some stock or a horse or a random lottery ticket. Nope, it was on a person, my boyfriend, Cody. The moment I met him, I saw it. This raw, untamed ambition, this spark of something. Greatness, maybe? Or at least the kind of success that totally changes your zip code and the label on your handbag. I convinced myself that being with the guy destined for greatness was pretty much as good as achieving it myself. Love, oh, that was a secondary thing, a minor detail I figured I could smooth over later. I told myself his success would become our love story. What I didn't count on, what I tried so hard to avoid, was the day he'd look at me and see not a supportive partner, but a strategist. And that day came, not with some quiet little light bulb moment, but with a bang that took down everything I'd worked so hard to build. Cody. Even now, just saying his name brings up this complicated swirl of, well, not love, not anymore, but something. When we first met at a mutual friend's truly awful open mic night, he was the only one who wasn't disastrous. His poetry was actually surprisingly good. I wasn't hit by Cupid's arrow. Not at all. I was struck by his potential. He had this relentless drive, the way he talked about his software ideas, his tech startups, his 5-year plans. It was completely captivating. He wasn't just dreaming, he was building, like an architect. And I, with my okay but definitely not skyrocketing marketing job, saw a first-class ticket attached to his rising star. Sounds cold, doesn't it? Calculating. And maybe it was, but I rationalized it. So many people settle, right? They settle for comfortable, for good enough. I told myself I was being smart, practical. Love felt fleeting, just a chemical reaction. But success was real. You could touch it. It bought security, respect, the kind of life I really craved. So I became the perfect girlfriend, supportive, encouraging, the one who believed in him when nobody else did. I proofread his business plans, networked for him at those mind-numbingly dull industry events, listened for hours while he workshopped ideas that, honestly, often went right over my head. I learned to mirror his enthusiasm, to parrot his ambitions back to him with a big, encouraging smile. The guilt? Oh, it was there. Definitely. A dull ache in my chest whenever he'd look at me with such open, honest affection, telling me how much my support meant. "You're my rock, Marissa," he'd say, squeezing my hand. And I'd smile back, this perfectly crafted, loving smile, while inside, a little voice whispered, "Fraud." I'd just push it down, telling myself that this was a different kind of love, a love of being close to brilliance, a love of the life he could give me. He was working on an app back then, something about streamlining creative workflows. It was genuinely innovative, and the buzz was starting to build. I saw the early glimmers of interest from venture capitalists, those appreciative nods from industry insiders. This was it. This was the horse I was backing, and it was looking like a real thoroughbred. Our apartment, a trendy little 2-bedroom he could barely afford but insisted on because, in his words, we need to live like we're already there, became my gilded cage. It was filled with his dreams, his blueprints, his late-night coding marathons, and I was the dutiful, adoring curator of his emerging genius. I kept telling myself the charade was worth it, that one day when he was on the cover of Forbes or Time or whatever the tech equivalent was, this uneasy feeling in my stomach would just dissolve, replaced by the warm glow of a shared win. The familiarity of our routine became this strange sort of comfort. His specific coffee order, the way he hummed when he was deep in thought, that worn-out hoodie he always coded in. These weren't signs of love, not for me, but they were signs of my investment. I knew him, I knew his habits, and I knew with a certainty that sometimes scared me, that he was going to make it. And I was going to be right there by his side, whether I truly loved him or not. It was a dangerous game, playing the long con on someone's heart, especially someone who seemed to be giving me theirs so completely. But the potential payoff, that dazzling future, always seemed to justify how I was doing it. For the first few years, it was actually surprisingly easy. Cody was so wrapped up in his projects, so focused on climbing that ladder, that he seemed to just take my unwavering support as a given, like a reliable part of his world. But as his app, Synergy Flow, started to get real traction, something shifted. Maybe it was the increased scrutiny, the higher stakes, or maybe, just maybe, he started to have more time to actually see me, not just the supportive reflection I was showing him. The first crack was tiny. He'd started getting a lot of media attention. Local news, then tech blogs, then a feature in a pretty big online magazine. I'd gush, of course, carefully collecting his press clippings, framing that magazine feature. "We did it, babe," I'd say, with all the fake enthusiasm I could whip up. One evening, after a particularly glowing review came out, he was quieter than usual. Instead of his typical excited chatter about what this meant for the next funding round, he just looked at me, this strange, searching look in his eyes. "Marissa," he said, his voice really thoughtful. "You always know the right thing to say. It's like you've read the script." I laughed it off, maybe a little too quickly. "Just proud of you, that's all." But his gaze lingered a moment too long, and a little sliver of ice ran down my spine. Then came the smaller, more frequent tremors. He started asking questions I just wasn't ready for. Not about his work, but about us. "What do you dream about, Marissa? Besides all this?" he asked one night as we were lying in bed, the city lights painting stripes across the ceiling. I kind of fumbled, offered some vague lines about happiness and shared experiences. The truth? My dreams were totally tangled up with his success. Without it, my own future felt blank, like this terrifying empty space. His efforts to please me, which once felt like proof my strategy was working, now felt like tests. He'd planned these elaborate date nights, remembering some throwaway comment I'd made weeks before about a restaurant I wanted to try, or a show I was interested in. Each gesture, each thoughtful act, felt like another brick in the wall of my guilt. He was trying so hard, investing so much real emotion, and I was, what? A calculating opportunist. The gap between his sincerity and my deceit was becoming this physical weight. I remember one particularly awful evening. He'd been nominated for a local tech award, a pretty big deal. He bought me a new dress, this stunning, expensive thing I'd never have bought for myself. "I want you to shine tonight," he'd said, his eyes full of genuine affection. "You're my good luck charm, my biggest believer." All through the ceremony, as he networked and smiled, I felt like such an imposter in that beautiful dress. He didn't win, and you could just see the disappointment on his face. Later, back in our apartment, he was quiet. I went through my usual motions. "You were robbed. Next year it's yours." But my words felt hollow, even to me. He just looked at me and said, "Sometimes I wonder if you see me, Marissa, or just the guy who's supposed to win." My heart hammered. I denied it, of course, strongly, maybe a little too defensively. But the seed of doubt had been planted, not just in his mind, but in mine too. Was my performance starting to slip? Was the mask becoming see-through? A friend of ours, Sarah, who'd known Cody since college, cornered me at a party once. "You know," she said, stirring her drink, "Cody's a good guy, like genuinely good. He deserves someone who's all in for him." not just for the ride." Her words, though casual, hit me like a perfectly aimed missile. I brushed it off with a laugh, told her she was being overly dramatic, but her observation just echoed Cody's own unsettling questions. The cracks weren't tiny anymore. They were growing, threatening the whole carefully built structure of our relationship. I found myself walking on eggshells, constantly checking my reactions, my words, terrified of any misstep that would bring it all crashing down. The comfort I'd once found in our life together was turning into this suffocating anxiety. He was getting closer to his greatness, but he was also getting closer to seeing the truth about me. The unraveling didn't happen with some sudden dramatic showdown, not at first anyway. It was more like watching a slow-motion train wreck, one I could see coming but felt totally powerless to stop. The spectacular way it all fell apart was less a single explosion and more like a series of smaller bombs going off, each one more damaging than the last. It started with my birthday. Cody, bless his then clueless heart, had been planning something for months. He was more secretive than usual, dropping hints about a life-changing surprise. My mind, of course, went straight to a proposal, not because I wanted it, God no, but because it seemed like the logical next step in the script he thought we were following. The thought filled me with this cold dread. How could I possibly say yes? How could I lock myself into this charade for good? But then again, how could I say no without revealing everything? The week before my birthday, Cody was jumpy, excited, and more attentive than ever. He was also incredibly busy with a new Synergy Flow update, working late nights, his brow all furrowed in concentration. One afternoon he was on a conference call in our home office, the door just slightly ajar. I was in the living room trying to distract myself with a book. But his voice, usually so confident and clear, sounded different, strained. He was talking to his co-founder, Ben. I couldn't hear everything, but bits and pieces floated out. "Don't know how to bring it up," Cody was saying, his voice low. "She's expecting something else entirely." My stomach just clenched. He knows I don't want to marry him. Then a different phrase. This whole thing with the potential investors, they want to meet her. Meet me? Why on earth? They said they want to see the support system, the stability. Apparently, a settled personal life is a green flag for a CEO. My blood ran absolutely cold. So, that was the life-changing surprise. Not a proposal out of love, but a calculated move. A performance for investors. The irony was so thick I could have choked on it. He was using me in his own way, just like I was using him. The difference was he probably didn't even realize the full extent of his own maneuvering, blinded as he was by his ambition. I, on the other hand, was painfully aware of every manipulative gear turning in my own head. But that wasn't even the spectacular part. That came a few days later. Cody had left his personal laptop open on the kitchen counter. A rare slip-up for him. He'd rushed out for an emergency meeting, something about a server crash. I knew I shouldn't. It was a total violation of trust, a line I hadn't crossed yet, despite everything. But the anxiety, the paranoia, the desperate need to know what was really going on was like this physical force pushing me. My hand actually trembled as I touched the trackpad. His email was open. My eyes scanned, landing on a thread with Ben, subject line, "Marissa Strategy." My breath hitched. Strategy, not Marissa birthday surprise or Marissa my love. Strategy. I clicked. The emails laid it all out. Not just the investor angle, but something far, far worse. Cody and Ben were discussing my role, how my unwavering belief was a key asset, how my enthusiasm was infectious for the team. But then the killer lines from Ben. "Are you sure she's genuinely in it for the long haul, Cody, or just the perks? I've seen her face at those investor dinners. It's a good performance, but sometimes it feels like a performance." Cody's reply. "I know, man. I've had my doubts. Sometimes I feel like I'm just a project to her future greatness project. But I need her right now. This Series B funding is critical. We need to present a united front. After that, we'll see. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe she really does. You know. My world just tilted. He knew. Or at least he suspected deeply. He wasn't oblivious at all. He was complicit, tolerating my charade for his own benefit. The shock was like a physical blow. It knocked the air right out of my lungs. I wasn't just a fraud. I was a transparent fraud. And he was playing along for his company. The years I'd spent crafting this image, this whole persona, and he'd seen through it, at least partly, and decided to use it anyway. I felt this bizarre mix of shame, fury, and a strange, twisted kind of vindication. He wasn't just the innocent, loving boyfriend I was deceiving. He was a player in his own right. The ground beneath me wasn't just cracking, it had completely vanished. I was in free fall. I backed away from the laptop, my hands shaking, my mind just reeling. The spectacular way the truth unraveled wasn't a single event. It was the horrifying realization that the entire foundation of our relationship, from both sides, was built on this complex, unspoken web of mutual exploitation, all masked by the appearance of a loving partnership. And my meticulously planned future was about to absolutely detonate. He was due back any minute. The confrontation I had always dreaded, the one I desperately hoped he'd never realize was necessary, was now hurtling towards me like a freight train. The sound of his keys in the lock was like a starting gun. I was still standing in the kitchen, those damning emails just burned into my brain. He walked in, looking stressed from his server emergency, but he actually managed a small smile when he saw me. "Hey, crisis averted, for now." I didn't say a word. I just looked at him, really looked at him, maybe for the first time, without the filter of his potential or my plans. I saw the tiredness in his eyes, the stress lines around his mouth, and I saw the calculation he'd tried so hard to hide. "Marissa, you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." "I saw your emails, Cody," I said, my voice flat, completely empty of the storm of emotion churning inside me. "The ones with Ben. About your Marissa strategy." The smile vanished. His face went pale, then flushed a dark red. He opened his mouth, then closed it. For a moment, the only sound was the hum of the refrigerator, this totally mundane soundtrack to our lives imploding. "It's not what you think," he finally managed, but his voice had zero conviction. "Isn't it?" I shot back, a bitter laugh escaping me. "Isn't it exactly what I think? That you know I'm not head over heels in love with you? That you suspect I'm here for the perks, as Ben so delicately put it? And you're okay with that as long as I play my part for the investors? As long as I'm your key asset?" Each word was like a poisoned dart, and I saw every single one land. He flinched. "That's not fair, Marissa. It's more complicated than that." "Complicated?" I was practically shouting now, the carefully controlled facade I'd kept up for years just shattering into a million pieces. "What's complicated, Cody? The fact that I've been living a lie, pretending to adore you so I can bask in your future glory, or the fact that you've suspected it, maybe even known it, and decided to play along because it suits your business plan? Which part is the complicated part, Cody? Because it all seems pretty damn clear to me." "I do have feelings for you, Marissa," he insisted, his voice rising to match mine. "Real feelings. But yes, okay, have I had doubts? Yes, sometimes you're so supportive, it feels rehearsed. Sometimes I look at you and I wonder if you even see me, or just some stepping stone to a lifestyle you want." "And yet you stayed," I cried, the hypocrisy of my own statement not lost on me, but the rage was like a wildfire now. "You stayed, suspecting all of this because you needed me for your Series B funding. My God, Cody, who is using whom here?" The air crackled with accusations, with years of unspoken truths and carefully hidden motives. Tears were streaming down my face, hot and angry. His own eyes were glistening. "Maybe we were both using each other," he said, his voice cracking. Maybe this whole thing was just a transaction we dressed up as a relationship. His words, though brutal, were undeniably true, and hearing that truth spoken aloud was devastating. The fight just drained out of me, replaced by this vast, echoing emptiness. "So, what now?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Cody ran a hand through his hair, looking utterly defeated. "I don't know, Marissa. What can be now? We can't go back to pretending, can we?" "No," I said, a strange sense of finality settling over me. "No, we can't." The dramatic breakup I had secretly known was coming. The one I'd both feared and, on some level, kind of expected was here. It wasn't a screaming match that ended with slammed doors. It was this quiet, exhausted admission of mutual deceit. "I guess this is it then," he said, looking around the apartment, our gilded cage, now just a set for a failed play. "I guess so." I felt a surprising pang, not of lost love, but of a lost future. The future I had banked everything on. It was gone, vanished with those emails, with this horrifyingly honest conversation. He nodded slowly. I'll find somewhere else to stay tonight." And just like that, it was over. No grand declarations, no pleas to try again, just the quiet, definite severing of a bond built on a foundation of lies. He walked into the bedroom, and a few minutes later came out with a hastily packed overnight bag. He paused at the door, his hand on the knob. He looked at me one last time, his face a mixture of pain, anger, and something else I couldn't quite make out. Relief, maybe? "Goodbye, Marissa." "Goodbye, Cody." And then he was gone. The door clicked shut, and the silence he left behind was deafening. The spectacular unraveling was complete. The devastating confrontation had happened, and the dramatic breakup I secretly knew was coming had arrived, leaving me alone in the wreckage of my own meticulously designed and spectacularly failed strategy. The first few days were a blur of numb disbelief and this hollow ache that settled deep in my bones. The apartment, once a symbol of my amazing future, now just felt like a tomb. His side of the closet, empty. His coffee mug unwashed by the sink. Each small absence was a fresh stab of something. Not heartbreak, not in the classic sense. It was more like the phantom limb pain of a future that had been cut off. The loneliness was a heavy cloak, just suffocating. I had poured 5 years of my life, my youth, my emotional energy, however fake it was, into this gamble, and I had lost. Big time. There was regret, of course, a bitter, acidic wave of it. Regret for the deceit, for the emotional toll it had clearly taken on Cody, a toll I had been too wrapped up in myself to fully appreciate. And regret for my own stupidity, believing I could somehow orchestrate a life based on someone else's success without any real emotional foundation. The excuses I'd so carefully built now seemed flimsy and just pathetic. Comfort in familiarity, fear of being alone. Those were the pathetic reasons I'd used to justify a path that was, at its core, deeply unfair to him and ultimately to myself. I replayed that final confrontation endlessly in my mind. His accusation that I saw him as a project stung the most, because it was true. I hadn't loved Cody, the man. I had loved Cody, the idea. Cody, the future CEO. Cody, the ticket to a life I wanted so badly, and in the end, that cold, hard truth had cost me everything. The silence in the apartment was broken only by my own self-blame. What now? My carefully laid plans were in ashes. His predicted greatness might still happen, probably would, but I wouldn't be there to see it, to share in it. I was left with the stark realization that in trying to secure a golden future, I had thrown away any chance at genuine connection, and now I had neither. The cost of my gamble was far higher than I had ever imagined. Looking back, it's easy to paint myself as the villain, and yeah, in many ways, I was. I was manipulative, dishonest, and I used someone's genuine affection for my own calculated reasons. But the story, like most, is rarely black and white, is it? Cody wasn't entirely an innocent victim either. He made his own strategic choices when he suspected the truth. We were two flawed people, caught in a dance of ambition and insecurity. What did I learn? Well, I learned that shortcuts to happiness, especially those built on lies, often lead to a much longer, harder road. I learned that the appeal of a great future means nothing if the present is a sham. Authenticity, it turns out, isn't just some trendy word. It's the bedrock of anything real and lasting. As for Cody, Synergy Flow got its Series B funding, and then some. He's doing phenomenally well. I see his face on tech blogs sometimes, looking confident, successful, every bit the man I predicted he would become. There's a certain irony in that, a bitter pill to swallow. He got his greatness. I got a very harsh lesson. I'm not with anyone now. I'm working on myself, trying to figure out what I actually want, not what I think someone else's success can give me. The dramatic breakup I secretly knew was coming did indeed happen, and it forced me to confront some pretty ugly truths. Maybe that, in its own painful way, was the start of my own, much quieter, much less spectacular journey towards something real.